Hello again. Welcome. It's a double talk special tonight, just like the old days. I'm here with KK out in the wonderful Antler factory, Antler office, not factory. Sorry about that. And we're gonna can you share your screen and
Let's start
share your screen to the meet too, so that they can see it. And he's gonna give a great little talk on MCP. Can you guys see his screen?
Just keep it here, and then 1 minute I'll just move the screen. Okay.
Yeah, if you could just present, that'd be great. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. You could
Hello everyone.
talk to them. You could talk to us.
Yeah. So a hot topic. We are going to talk about model context protocol, some of the shortcomings of it, and I'm working at a company called Fastn.ai. Fastn is an Antler-based startup. You will learn about Fastn too, but for the community, I'll start about model context protocol, and also the Python community was quick enough to come up with a SDK for it. We might go to SDK based on whatever users ask, but how many of you have used MCP yourself? Like
the demo, the local file system demo. Yes.
Oh, nice. So yeah, this is very similar, but just to give a quick context of what's happening, model context actually means just that if you are making an LLM call, that needs context, and if you want to call an external tool, or if you want to do something outside of the model's context, the model need to have context when you are making an LLM call. Say, for example, if you want, if you ask model, hey, can you help me send an email? So the model or the ChatGPT, for example, will give you an email text summary. It will not do it for you. If you want to do the action for you, there are specific ways that you can do it. Or you have to write a code, use their API, and make an API call. And you have to tell it, there is this API URL, this is the subject, and this is where you are sending. You have to tell it. The Anthropic community came up with open source project, the context protocols, where this is standardized. When you are giving access the model tools and the actions and the URL it has to call, now they have standardized way of how do you give this model all the context that it needs in terms of calling external tools. If you are calling, for example, if you want to send an action, for example, if I action, what I'm referring to as an action here is you want to send an email, you will ask the model, hey, can you write this email and send it to this person? Like you will give his email ID. Now you want the model to send the email to, like you want the model to perform an action, going to the agentic approach, right? So earlier we were not able to do it, or we were able to do it, but you had to write a lot of code for it. And every implementation was different. Like one person did it one way, the second person did it the other way. And also there was fear among the community. I'm giving so much details to the model. Like what is all this information is going somewhere? Like I can use somebody else's code, but also I'm not sure how it is being used, right? So to overcome all this, now there is a particular schema. You can call it schema or a protocol. That okay, you do it this way. You do something called a server, which is responsible for calling different actions, different tools. And to access this server, you will also implement something called a client. We call this model MCP client, and there is an MCP server. So going back to the diagram, what I'm sharing here. Earlier, say I want to send a message to Slack, every implementation will be sent. Now I have a client. Say for example, I get a client code which I integrate with ChatGPT, and that will interact with the server. Now, if I type in ChatGPT, I send a message to this client is responsible for contacting that server, and the message goes. Okay, that's on a high level of how this thing works. I can make it much more simple with actual demo of how this works, how this would work. But also the catch here is you have to implement the MCP server too. You need to have that one interface which talks to all these things. you have to write that code. There are Python SDKs to do it. We will talk about all this again. I have one more diagram with me of how these things work. So assume this is your Claude chat agent. You will have client interacting with different servers. You can have different servers. We'll show you how to configure and how to work with all this. And there are also disadvantages with whatever which is happening here. And can anybody think of any potential disadvantages or shortcomings as of now? As in,
trusting it too much with the information you're actually doing.
Yes, trusting it too much without knowing what's happening in the background.
Yeah. And we can add some vulnerabilities like through the server and make some things that we may not think.
Very good point. So the shortcoming, what suggested was assume there is an MCP server, and I don't know what's behind it, and I just take the URL and then I start using it. You don't know somebody is injecting any vulnerability or something like that, right? So that's one.
I think one of the shortcomings is that a lot of these tools are built for people, and so your servers are kind of like, I've seen a lot of like Playwright tools on top of these tools, with like just trying to mimic human interactions. And like that's just how we built all these tools, because they're all for people. But in the future, they'll probably have their own MCP, like how we have application protocol interfaces. We'll have machine learning protocol interfaces. So you won't really even have your own server. They'll kind of come with it.
Yeah, interesting. Actually, that's a good segue to where I was going. In fact, people have already started doing it in a way. I was about to share this. There are already open source MCP servers which are just available, and some of these are auto-generated. So again, going back to the angle that you were suggesting earlier, all these are different MCP servers. You can go here, you can find, but you don't know what's going on inside. In some of these, you don't see the implementation of what's happening inside. What tools they are calling you do not have access to, but they're asking, hey, can you configure it in your MCP client and use it? And people are doing that too. You never know. So it's a big list of servers which are all this, like more than 3,000 of them already, span of 3 weeks. And yeah, we don't know where we are going with the same approach. But coming to all the disadvantages, we have a founder of Fastn here, Khalid. Hi, Khalid.
Hello, great to meet you guys.
Yeah, and maybe you can talk a little bit about what's Fastn and.
Awesome. So, cool. What is Fastn? What is my background? I'm Khalid. I'm originally from Yemen. Came as a student, worked for Amazon, and there was a VP for 2 different startups. But what I found, the architecture, when it evolved over time from from monolithic client server to microservices, and now they go to nano services, like let's say the Lambda, the APIs, and AI agents. AI agents just another API. So data becomes siloed, it becomes fragmented. So in order to build application, there is a lot of composability orchestration needs to happen, how to deal with that fragmented data. So, and the goal of Fastn came, how do we build an interconnected ecosystem? So how do you access any data globally in real time? It doesn't matter. When you build a software, you need data inbound or outbound. Currently they build it with, I have to do a lot of custom integrations, it becomes problematic and robust and all of that. So we look into in Fastn, how do we make an interconnected ecosystem really easily? So we started to focus on that interconnected ecosystem to build an integration hub or integration marketplace. If in every SaaS product, there is an integration hub. So as what, guys, the integration hub, that's like in every product is the place where you try to go to connect with different products. So we gain, like HP is our customers and a few others people were, we become that integration hub, it's like it's white labeled. Like, let's say if you are a product, you need 5 connectors. So either you're going to go build them custom or you're going to use Fastn as an embedded. Within a day, you have that 5 connectors ready, with your product. We don't want people, don't worry about connections or interconnection, just focus on your product. Fastn can be the bridge to do all of that connection. So And we started with the concept of automation, so we can connect to anything with a human language as well. So MCP came in, it becomes a huge hype where it tries to solve the same problem for LLMs, like how do I need to connect LLMs with a human language? What MCP is, KK explained it really well, but what MCP, it's pretty much the MCP server is an API that translates a prompt into an actual structured API call. It's like, because under the hood is just an API call that it makes, but how can I take the prompt and make it from unstructured to structured? That's what the MCP server. So that has a lot of limitations. It doesn't scale. And the reason why it doesn't scale, do you guys know what the difference between API and library?
In the library.
Yeah.
Only exposing so much functionality.
Yeah.
Yeah, a library you consume, it run locally, the API abstract. When you change an API and deploy it, everybody get that change. The library, no, like everybody have a copy of it, so you gotta update it. So the first thing, when you have servers localized, every time you need to update an API, assume everybody using MCP server in a million of software. Now this million software, they have to go update it as a library model. That doesn't scale, it's a backward. People moved from libraries to API, that's a more scalable way. Basically running things locally right now, why they require it to run using a desktop, not the browser, it doesn't work with web because it needs to talk to an internal API and then output it to work. So the other thing is if you tried MCP, if you try more than 12 tools, it will start breaking because it gets all the tools and it fills them as a context in the prompt under the hood, and you're going to have as many number of tokens in each API. Once it exceeds it, then that's it. You can't make a prompt anymore. So that's another limitation, limited connectivity. Authentication, it's insecure. If you want to run a server local, you want to give it your username and password or API keys. And that's in a plain local. Like if you need to use OAuth, which is an insecure way, you can't do that. So other, like if you are enterprise grade, you need a multi-tenancy, it doesn't work for you. If you are an enterprise where you have a different data, like let's say you have the same connection, but it changes, I have a flexible attribute from one customer to another, the attribute changes. It doesn't work for it because this is a rigid, like whatever attribute you hard coded in the server, that will work. So what we realized, those are a lot of limitations in the MCP that Fastn already solved a year ago, but we haven't shared it. We were heads down to focus in there. So we're trying to just, while there is a huge hype in MCP, and the reason of the hype, because it's simple. Why there are 3,000 servers? Just a single file, you can translate a prompt to an API. Everybody build it, and then they celebrate it, which is great. I think that's the technology bringing a good aspect of standardizations to make it easy for LLM to access. So what we call MCP Plus or Fastn UCL, it's gonna make it easy, and solve those limitations. With a single MCP server, you can do all that power, or with Fastn UCL, which is a single API, you can talk to that single API. Any prompt you send it to it, under the hood it will connect. All what you need before that is just make your connection. Let's say if you wanna send an email, you go authenticate your email. After you authenticate, send it a prompt, send an email to this person, and it will do it. So as we haven't published this publicly, it's still in beta. We'll look into just share this with more audience, especially who used MCP, to share any feedback, to try it out before we release it to the public. Go ahead.
I have a question. So I'm actually not sure. So is MCP protocol like part of the IEEE standard? Does Anthropic own this standardization, this protocol? Like, does anyone actually like the MCP is on GitHub?
Yeah, it's open source.
It's just open source, but it's not like in the IEEE yet.
I don't know about
I don't think
that,
so.
but yeah, it's just a protocol under the hood.
But, like,
Still uses
another-
HTTP. So.
Like who like do you propose, like, you'll add authentication, right? Like that's pretty great. Like that should be part of the protocol and the standard.
That's right.
Do you like propose that to Anthropic, or like do they end up building that themselves, or is it's open source, someone throws it into their repo, I guess? Like who builds the standard? Like I know it's an open source standard, but there's like, does it go to the IEEE? Does someone else take it over?
I'm not sure, but when I see there is a decent community, they try to contribute with a lot of people. And also, I don't know if you guys heard about ACP, it's coming
Not
You know,
MCP.
it's another version came from IBM. They called it ACP, Agent Communication Protocol. And this past few days, the CTO of HubSpot, it's like, oh, there were limitations in MCP. We're coming with something new. So I think, as you mentioned, it's something for the demo. It's a standard. It drove up us to make AI agents to start talking. You know, there is going to be a community to collaborate, but there will be a lot of innovations. I didn't believe, based on how I seen the ID, I didn't believe any production application already in MCP due to those limitations. But it's a good to start for a demo, for an end user, for a consumer who want to try something. But if you want to take your agentic to fix the data access problem using MCP, you're going to have those limitations, and that's where Fastn was that maybe we might be a player who can make that data access easily. We are trying to contact Anthropics as well, like as they have an open source community. What do we do to really help them in them? Some of them, it can be solved by open source, but some of them, they need server to be run in the back.
Yeah.
You know, they need an infrastructure. And that's where Fastn, we have that infrastructure, because if you have credentials, they need to be stored in a SOC 2 compliance way. They need to authenticate with OAuth. There's a lot of stuff to do where it's not going to come out of a box. So yeah, maybe after with this QR code, you guys could scan it, take a look at Fastn and the content, and you will understand more. If you are passionate about MCP or data access for LLM or for your software, we would love for you just to share any feedback in terms of contents or when you try it out.
Yeah.
What do you think, you know, works, what doesn't? So
Basically, it's when they go to the platform, that's what they see. Since the very less number of people are having the laptop here.
Yeah, awesome. So, but any questions in the limitations or in the value of the MCP? I'm not sure if I was able to communicate the value prop and the limitation clearly, but does anybody have any question?
Guys, I have a question first. You went too fast for me, and I usually like it slow, so I ask questions. Please try to help me, okay? This MCP has to do with the context window of the LLM that you're using. True or false?
Sort of. You want me to? I have a good way of explaining it, Jacob. So before we used to make kind of a monolith approach to tools. It's really a standard way of building tools and adding them, you know, allowing your LLM to use tools. Before, you'd write your custom tool for your Gmail, right? You'd have hard-coded Python in LangChain, and you'd say, okay, like make a decision to send an email, like pick a tool. And it was very unstandardized. It would be like, oh, if the word email shows up, maybe I should send an email or something. And then maybe you had another piece, maybe you had another source like a Google Doc, and you built some very hard-coded tool. But now you can deploy like microservice servers of tools. So you could have a Gmail server, and it'll have tools, and it'll say, send an email, like reply to an email, like get your contacts or something like that. So now, and between the two, it'll send that context. So it'll send the tool's context and say, this is a tool that will send an email. Here are the different endpoints of that tool. This endpoint will list the recipients. This will list your context. And then your LLM agent will call those endpoints. They'll call those endpoints, and they'll know that context originally on the original handshake. And now it's like, I can use those. Now it knows how to like really use those. And now you can just kind of plug and play different servers in more of like a microservice approach.
Okay, so now I no longer have to write like a separate function saying this is the tool, this is the context of the tool.
You write separate functions, but they're now in a standard way that I can use your server.
Yeah,
like
I can answer. Yeah, you didn't have to write it, but even if you write the function, you have to execute that API call. You have to figure out that will just give you that different function, give you the data mapping.
So the tool definition is no longer in my code, is just an API call to you, and then later I can say, oh, instead of Gmail, I want to, Hotmail or whatever it is, and to do the same.
That's right. It's just API call with a prompt, and under the hood, you authenticate it through the API. If you authenticate Hotmail, it will send it to Hotmail. If you do Gmail, it will send it to Gmail.
So if you're using one type of LLM, let's say Grok is not the same one that you're using like with the Gemini or whatever, then the tools there don't look the same. Now they will look the same because I'm using this MCP, correct?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it doesn't. It's not model specific because it's all language. It's all just
That's right.
natural language. It's just sending context about the tools. So it's like, I am a Gmail tool. I can send an email for you. And then when you're chatting with your LLM, you can just, it'll say, oh, it wants me to send an email. I'll use this tool.
And there will be a library of those tools that people can hook up and take and
Sorry.
use.
Repeat that.
Will there be a library of those tools that people can pick up and choose and say, oh, today I want to use those tools? Let's say weather.
It might help when we show a demo this, Jacob. And sorry for us for going fast, but after the demo, we maybe can get, it might answer some of those questions. It will make it easy.
Okay. So you're showing the demo. Okay, please.
Sure.
And
This is what
the list of all the tools. Okay.
Just
perfect.
I might have it, and also I'm just pasting this link. People who want to try it.
Yeah, we'll get Fastn.ai from there. They can
Yeah.
navigate their website.
Just typing the link here.
But Jacob, this has been very very hot, very popular, very cool. Quickly taking over the agent space.
That's
Yeah.
okay. That's good, but I want to understand. Now I understand.
Okay. I click right. Say for example, let me disconnect first, and then I want to send a message, but under the hood, in the prompt, I won't tell the model like I had to use Slack, for example. So let me. End of the day, what I want to do here is I have a client. Say the client, I call it as a chat agent. I'm using a cursor as a client. So the action. Okay, here. Action I want to do here is, see, I just want to send here something
you
like,
might need to restart because you disconnected.
yeah. Let's do it here. Something like this, send a message to KK, and I don't tell the model to use Slack or whatever tool under the hood. It figures out it has to fetch the contact and then send a message to Slack. So that's one of the action that I have to perform. Just look at this window, but I'll come to this and explain in detail. But this is what I want to do. I just want to say send a message to KK, and I'm KK, and it has to send a message. I'll perform that, like show you how to do it. So in our dashboard, I'm connecting tools. Say for example, I will connect to my Slack account, or maybe I'll connect a different account. I don't want to show all the chat. So I select all the actions that I want to perform. This is what you were asking, Jacob, like different functions, sending a message, get the user by email, get all the channels. All these are different APIs inside which are available, right? So I select all that, and then
So the LLM needs to know that you translated those APIs to something that's like to do this, get
Correct.
this, get the name. All of those things are already standardized for Slack.
right, exactly.
All what you do is just enable. After you enable it, the second step, it's just an integration. Like once you plug in this endpoint, you don't have to. Let's say if you want to talk to this from Cursor, from Cloud, or even from Fastn agent, if you go back to this, we have a Fastn chat agent. Once you enable a tool in there, you can chat to it. Now, if he mentions send a Slack message, it will send a Slack message.
Yeah.
If he enable the calendar, it will create a calendar invite.
Okay,
Or
guys,
you just enable it there.
you might want, since this is being recorded, you might want to change the API key you use because it just
Yeah.
appeared.
After this, we will change it.
Yeah, just drop it, get another API one, because otherwise either we have to blank it on the demo on this after, but like drop it after this demo.
That's fine. That's a test project. They wouldn't need it. Everybody create a project, they get a different API key, so it's totally fine.
Yeah, kill that API for me. Otherwise, you'll get billed by I don't know who.
Okay, send a welcome message and say hi to everyone. Let's see, I have connected to Slack, and this is how my Slack looks like 1 minute. I have, yeah. So this is how my Slack looks like. And I am sending a message from my cursor agent. Let's see. And I can see what's going on. Like, okay, I'll get the available channels to find appropriate one for the meetup. It is calling get channels API. It is identifying like what API to call. And this is the tool call, which is happening under the hood. So it decided it will post that in the general channel. And then it is saying there is a send message API that it can call. And it is making this tool call. And I can open Slack and, in the general channel. So yeah, it just
now.
yeah.
Okay, great. Now I understand what it means. Now I understand what you're doing. Thank you. This demo is really good.
Yeah, I'll show that. Thank you, Jacob. There was a question from the audience. Just going through that.
So how did you connect like Fastn to like that?
Oh, very easy. Yeah, very easy. So you go to here.
Maybe you start from Fastn. So
Yeah.
like if you go back to
Yeah, repeat the question because the video didn't catch it.
Okay, so the question is, how do you connect an MCP server? This is the MCP server. Here, Fastn gave you the MCP server. How do you connect to your MCP client, the chat agent? So I go to cursor or any client for that matter. So they always have in the settings. It's the settings. Cursor has it. Cloud Desktop has it. You go to settings. You come to this page, and here you can add new global search, and then you just paste it here. That's it. You don't have to do anything then other than that. You just paste it here. You are good to go. I'm not sure. Latest version, VS Code released the recent update. Yeah, if you, as in, they have just done the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and anywhere they support MCP server, you can plug it in. What we say, instead of having multiple servers to deal with locally, you deal with Fastn, everything under the hood, managed through authentication. The other way, if you go back, KK, like if you want to talk to it from your command line, we have this UCL protocol, which is Fastn. That's what you can just, this is just a normal curl command. You can give it the prompts and the Slack message, and you can integrate it to any of your applications. So it doesn't have to be limited to only those tools that support the MCP server.
Yeah, MCP server, we thought it's one way to connect it. APIs were already existing before. You can always have an API also to do the same thing. So we also have an API from us. Yeah, the community don't have an API yet. I'm sure they'll come up with one API later.
So you can just give it an arbitrary API and it'll generate MCP.
In Fastn, yeah.
With Fastn, yeah.
See, without Fastn also, you need to have an MCP server no matter what. If as in you have to implement it. Say, for example, you have an API under the hood, and you want an MCP client to talk to a server, right? You need to implement the server yourself. That's hard. As in, there are Python SDK to implement the server. You have to run it something. Like some translation has to happen. Like you give a prompt, it has to identify which tool it has to call, or under the hood which API to be called, right?
Yeah.
That translation, you need to have a server, or you need to have something for it. And that layer is something the community expects you to build it. And that's where the risk is again. A random guy build it and say that this is a server, you don't know what's behind it.
Can you show the demo servers? Or
Let's
do that.
But the goal with this API, with anything, just with a single API integration inside the application, everything you do it through Fastn. If you need to integrate with a new API, you add it in Fastn, and this will process inside that one. It depends on your API description. It will understand it from the front and it will route it to that. It depends on what input it expects. As long as it's existing in here, it will translate it to a data mapping and send it to your API. If it doesn't exist and it doesn't have all the field, it will return to you with the response, provided that this information.
Have you considered adding different levels of security clearance to this? So like, let's say I have an API for my company.
Yep.
And maybe I want this organization to be able to access all the functions and another one to only organize some stuff.
You have to, yeah. This is one of the limitations which we didn't zoom in there. If you go back, KK, to the
Limitation.
no, to the even Fastn, you have it. Yep. So we have something we call it a tenant ID. If you see it on our website, it's a limitation. Tenant ID is a group of consumers. If you say organization one, it's tenant ID one, organization two, it's two. And that way you can have different organizations, they use their own credentials, or if they didn't even activate it, they can access it.
Okay.
So it have multi-tenancy built in support, and that's one of the limitations highlighted in the website. MCP. They don't have such a functionality.
Okay, and you were requesting the
You show like a demo server.
Yeah.
Of like what these tools actually look like.
yeah. There is a database, MySQL.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see. They're showing how to integrate. So this is in this use case, you have to run the server.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what like the tools actually look like.
Yeah.
You just go into the
This is the server configuration where you have to give your path of where your MySQL node is, and then the version. Like you have to give the path in your local system.
So you need to run it locally and give the path where it's running, and you pass to it the credentials, your username and password, it will run the server locally.
Can you like go into this like the code?
This is the code.
No,
like,
go back, go up.
Go up.
Oh, okay. Oh, here.
Like in the source. Yeah. Of like what the
Let's see. The prompt. There should be something called prompt. Let's see. Should be.
yeah, like
This is DB. Let's see.
Yeah, it sounds good.
might just be that. They're pretty small. This creates tables or the index type scripts maybe.
Let's see.
Just in the
That script, go back.
Oh.
That's what it have the different queries. Just go to a normal API instead of a database, because that has queries. It's hard to grasp.
One here.
So if you go down here, I'll cover it.
like you want to see what that is.
So in here, this is where, it's like, it's going to take it from a configuration, authenticate to the database, and it will auto-generate some of those tables, based
Sure.
on-
I just wanted to show like the actual endpoint, like the tool, which is somewhere here. Like go back to the
No,
files.
this endpoint is for a database. The endpoint is just a database connection.
No, let's take
No,
a.
but it's gonna like talk to the database. It's gonna like run a query.
Let's take a simpler example, easier for us to search.
Go just.
Uh-huh.
Let me just look at the files here. Real quick.
Let's take this index.
Yeah, I think that might be it.
Yeah.
Scroll down a little bit. First,
Is there a route file somewhere? I guess that's.
yeah, like I want to like the list table function. That's what I'm looking for. Config. Okay.
Yeah, here it is.
This looks like something. So you send a request handler. Resources.
Ultimately, here you just tell the resources in here. It comes to this endpoint, and it will route it to that class where it runs the query from the other file. This is more of exposing the endpoint where it comes.
Yeah.
It construct that. So.
Okay. So yeah, like you build something like this where it will your AI agent will write a query, and then you'll have a very simple kind of like, okay, now execute code, and it'll have some sort of endpoint URL and has some context though about that tool. It's like this is going to execute queries on certain given table names.
That's right.
But they're not like the servers aren't very complex, is what I'm just trying to show. Because usually the complex part is like generating the query that you want to write for. So now you can make it. Cool. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's much more. You can see it like when you see the if some of the API implementation, it's just really out there. Like just the endpoint here, right? Yeah.
So in a way, like Fastn relies on the understanding of what the person understands what the user wants to do, right? Right. So let's say if I say cursor like send an email, right? Fastn relies on cursor that it can understands it correctly and find it.
Always, your client will tell you which tool to, as in that layer is still the client. Fastn gives you the server. Fastn also does an additional responsibility to select which, like the context of what connector it has to call. It has to do it. It has that layer too, but still, your first layer is the client.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so now how do you build custom business logic into your tools?
Interesting question. Maybe workflows.
So you can write a workflow, you can write any code and register it as a tool in Fastn. Like,
So
and-
can you take like your base tool and just like add your own little business context? Something like that?
so if you
Yeah.
if you go back to the cursor in there, so when we show the tools, what are the tools when you had it?
Oh yeah, 1 minute.
Cursor
Settings. Yeah, I have to. So here.
Yeah. So those are the different tools. Well, if you run a local server, when you run a local server, it will understand what server running and it will register those tools. But in Fastn, if you enable it through the UI, will dynamically update it in here, you without running anything locally. And we have a capability in Fastn, the tool, it cannot only be a connection. It can be even, you have a function, you have a workflow that executes a logic. You give it a description, execute a workflow, and you register it as a tool and interact with it as a tool. We expect some context from cursor whenever they have it, but if you use Fastn API directly, then it doesn't need any context. Like we expect you to share the whole prompt into with the whole information, and Fastn will be able to parse it, understand which tool does the mapping and does the execution.
Is this oriented more towards businesses, or also there a personal version of this too? That in terms of like pricing listed, but like the person wanted to use it personally instead of just setting up their own servers, features because it's convenient. Would you be able to share more on that?
Yeah, I think for now, given it's still in beta, we still try to figure out, but we are targeting, those level of limitations where I mentioned, they need people when they build a production ready application or enterprise.
Okay.
So if they're gonna see the most value only if they go through that way, and that's where we serve them. Consumer can still use it as a free tier with those.
There's a
But
free tier.
we have a free tier, yes. But they are not gonna see the most value if they can face any of those limitations. But like we believe every enterprise will face those limitations, and that's what Fastn the MCP booster. So.
I'm trying to figure out what context is relevant, like especially if the user has maybe some complex query where they're asking for 5 different things at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how are you able
We
to
use
do
LLM.
that? Okay.
And then the hood it's LLM to understand your context. As it works the best as it will resolve it, but if it hallucinates or if it has issues, you will be able to.
But was that better than like what cursor is doing? Because that also uses element, right?
Or it's not any better. The only difference, cursor, you're gonna use it limit. Imagine you're building a Python application you deploy, then you are limited. You can't, right? Like, and if you go to Anthropics, they say it has to be the desktop version. You can't do it from the web because they have that limitation. It needs to connect locally, and the web cannot connect locally. It's only the desktop app. So for us, we say we're gonna make it accessible to the web. It doesn't have to be to those specific applications. Any application you write, it can access any data in the internet through Fastn with a single API.
You can imagine something like this. There is a server running with Fastn, or like assume you build your own server. You connect to your internal APIs, 10 or 15 different APIs. You still have to run that server somewhere. And Fastn will do it for you. You'll get an endpoint, which is secure, which scales. And then wherever, assume you're having an SDK that you're building and writing an application yourself, you use the SDK, or in case if you are not using Fastn, you have your server. In your application, you're going to call that API, right? So very similar to that. So here, if you are doing any of this agentic approach where that all Cloud Desktop or Cursor UI, it's all chat. It's very one-person consumer centric. And also there is a very recently there was a talk by Anthropic guys as well, like when not to use an agent. Like if you exactly know the steps you are going to take, say you have to send an email always. You don't need an agent and LLM calls to do that. You can just build a direct workflow. You don't have to overkill it. So that's the reason this is intended for businesses and not just for one or two users, because sometimes it's much easier to just directly build a direct workflow than having LLM. You have
Well, like sometimes, well, what if you wanted to like pull out information from a chat channel and then put that into an email? It's like, yeah, you could build that system, or you like kind of have this workflow and take that as a workflow.
So in such cases, you can use such agents. Like there are such. I'm talking about like you building an entire application to do it, not necessarily. Like you can.
Yeah. Like you could build, like we have a lot of applications that send emails. That's like a lot of businesses like have automated email sending. And if you can automate the email sending, then you do that. But if it's like you have to pull in language information to craft it, yeah, you can call the other, you could build a system that does that with like language and stuff. But it's like you already have it in your MCP workflow. Like I could see the value of just like productionalizing an MCP workflow instead of having to like build systems to replicate that.
I agree. And it comes more when you connect, like you have a retry, logic, you have observability, which you didn't see. If you go back, you can see what the traffic went on. It's like there is a lot. It comes with a lot of tags. It's not as simple as code. So
yeah.
So the actions that we perform now, we can see that all the logs in real.
And we see what the actual request that mapped from the prompt, the actual input, and what's the actual output response came from Slack for that APIs.
Cool. Do you send that to this is your
Yeah. So this was the request, and then there is a response.
Is this all hosted on like on your own infrastructure? Can it be like there's some companies that want to have a little more controls, or can you have this more like kind of like a license type of?
Yes, we do. HP is using that license. As big enterprise, they might want an instance of this running in their own accounts.
Yeah. Most of the companies they want a little more control.
That's right. It comes with a cost for people to maintain, but it's worth it for the big ones.
Yeah.
But for early guys, they don't want to deal with the headache. Make me access any data, do anything easily. Let me focus on my core logic where it differentiate my things in the market. Market is moving fast. People doesn't need to waste their time in accessing data. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think we are good, Khalid.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. We have some cold pizzas.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Feel free to take home. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, guys.
I'm
Any
gonna just sign
question
off.
from there? We didn't ask them if they had any questions.